help the people close to me. They help the people close to them and then.
What's going on, y'all? We back. Another episode of Unguarded. It's your girl, Jory Davis. I'm here with the legend, the GOAT, Sinan. I hope I'm pronouncing that right.
That's perfect, Jory. Thank you very much thanks for having me.
Yeah, for sure. I thank you for hopping on the call, getting unguarded with us. As you know, it's a very intimate podcast. We're not trying to make it too big. It's more so let's have these conversations, and the ones that want to tap in and get some knowledge, they can. So we're gonna hop right into it. First thing is, what's making you happy this week thus far? Like this month, what has been some wins for you, the family, for the business? What's something that's top of mind? That's like, yes, things are moving in the right direction.
The biggest thing that's happening first off, I think you're doing something beautiful, giving the microphone to athletes and giving these moments for us to share stories. I'm a former athlete, so that's a different story to tell. But I think that you're doing something great, and I hope great success. The biggest thing that's happening around this week is my daughter is turning 5, and we're quite excited for that.
Yeah.
And many updates on work life and work and life balance in general. But I guess I am trying to get to a point where I can understand what my scouting report says on the business side.
Yeah.
And start creating impact on life.
Yeah. Definitely beautiful, and happy birthday.
Thank you very much.
To your daughter. You come from a basketball family. You know, obviously, again, you've played for Fenerbahce, you've played for big clubs, played EuroLeague. You came from a basketball family. One of the things that we evolve is that we do feel sharing of knowledge is key. But what I've seen is you'll see a Kyrie, dad played. How he transitioned went differently. You see the big three, the big, big baller brand. They had 3 brothers. The youngest one did things a little different. You could tell he moved different due to, I think, the knowledge of what the dad learned from the other 2 brothers.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to your journey coming from a basketball family, how important was it sharing of knowledge, of understanding how you were going to navigate your career? Of course, the genes, having the talent. Shout out to having the genes, shout out to the family, it runs in the family. But talk a little bit about how important being able to have those discussions with someone that's been through it, but has your best interest in mind, played a big change and impact on your career.
I think the funny thing with that is my mom played basketball and retired right before getting married.
Mm-hmm.
And my mom and dad are separated now, so that's a different story that happened when I started college. But she never liked us talking basketball at the house. And I know that my brother had a different story than I did because my brother was coached by my father as well, at least one season. But more than the conversation, it's experiencing what my dad went through, experiencing what my brother went through. Them experiencing what I'm going through created this non-verbal relationship between us. More important than the verbal side of it, because verbal side, we start talking about what happened in the game, what could have gone better, what are the mistakes that we can look through. Those are given and that they're very short. But the experience happened in the non-verbal side where I looked at every step that my brother took and took it to heart, learned from the mistakes, learned from the positive things that he did, and opened up a different path for myself.
Mm-hmm. Got you. And I know you all have created, in a sense, it's kind of an academy atmosphere that you've started. How has that played a part in you all creating what you've created for the next generation? And is it global, or is it just for those from the area in different parts of Turkey?
We had people coming into our camps through different countries. I think 15 countries attended to our camps, or 15 people from different countries, I guess. So we're trying to make it more global. I'm in Amsterdam now. We're trying to create partnerships and joint ventures that would explore those ideas. But the main thing is that we share an experience of 60 some years, started with my father in middle school, coming to my point, and lucky enough, my brother has two sons. One of them is 14. They're starting to play basketball as well. And we see how our experience shaping them. So we're
Mm-hmm.
creating this like almost ageless continuing relationship and continuing experience that we want to keep sharing with people. And we're a lucky family, as you mentioned. I'm grateful that I come from a basketball family and I grew up in the environment. But we're also trying to set a different example as parents, both me and my brother, because parenting an athlete is extremely hard and extremely damaging the sports in all countries. And
Mm-hmm.
I think we have to set a good example, and also we have to set the right educational opportunities for those parents so they can become better parents for their kids.
Yeah. You said you learned from watching your brother and
Mm.
going through it, living with through it with your dad. What were some of the key things that you saw that you were like, I'm gonna do this in a different way?
Ooh, I think the similar thing that we did together is figuring out doing the stuff that's not on the stat sheet to stay on the court.
Mm-hmm.
But the main thing that I did differently is the emotional side of it. I think my brother is extremely stoic on the court, hardly shows any emotions, and I was a bit more ups and downs type of person where if I'm happy, I'm showing that, and if I'm angry, I'm showing that, and they're extremely visible. I think that's the one of the things. Talent wise, I still believe that my brother was a more talented player, but I figured out a way to um, be a teammate that fills in all the gaps.
Mm-hmm.
Not that my brother didn't do it, I just focused on that part of it on the teams that I played for. So I wasn't stepping on anybody's shoes when I was playing, but at the same time, I was trying to benefit from what they bring out to the court.
Yeah. And I would assume that that being that person on the court um has to tug at the ego a little bit. Like how did because when you are that filler, when you're doing the little things that some don't see, only few that are really know the game and certain fans that really pay attention, like you are a key, but
Mm,
most don't see it. Um, Sometimes even the presidents don't see it.
mm,
They just like, why you got this guy? And but the coach knows there's a reason that I need this person on the court. Um, did you feel like it tugged at the ego sometimes that you had to keep the ego in check at times, knowing that? Because I know some people that are like that glue player that really can be a killer, like really can be
mm,
the best person on the floor, but they've chosen to play a role, which is taking kind of that sacrifice in a sense for the betterment of the teams you're on.
mm.
Um, when you say emotionally and figuring out how to be that guy, how did you do that? How did you go about that from an ego standpoint?
Um, main acceptance that I had came through the rules and restrictions of foreign players in Turkey. When I started coming up to a higher level, we had a 3-and-2 rule where two Turkish players had to be on the court. So that means that when I'm on the court, I'm there to pressure the crap out of the opponent point guard and make the right play if I touch the ball. That was my role. And I figured out we had certain players that could score any way they want and do whatever they can do. My game with them on an ego way happened in practice.
Mm-hmm.
And everything that I'm supposed to do on the court during the game, I try to do it the best way possible. That actually led me to kind of unleash the ego a little bit towards the like middle and like high peak of the career where I was running the court, I was the point guard, and I was taking more shots than I ever did. And I think the ego started kind of getting hurt later on because I couldn't do the same things physically.
Mm-hmm.
Um, But at the same time, for me, accepting my role, seeing the talent around me and finding ways to support them was a lot more important than what internally I was kind of going through.
Gotcha. We talked a little bit before about that. Obviously, I'm at the end
Mm,
of my journey, and definitely you get, I feel it sometimes. I'm like, look, if I was 30-year-old Jory, I would, you guys think now, the young rookies coming in like, oh, like, who are you? And I'm like, first of all, go lead a couple leagues. I don't care, any league overseas
yeah.
in scoring, and then come back to me and talk. It's like the ego really is like, okay, hold up. But you do take a step back and understand your value now. Your value
Hmm.
now could be IQ. Your value now could be helping make better decisions, making the right pass. The little things can keep you, as you said, on the court, on the team, etc. And knowing how competitive it is to be an American, or even if you have a certain passport.
Yeah.
Talking about the transition, of course, you talked about learning from your family.
Hmm.
When it came time to the being at the end, what was that reality like for you? And I'm sure the transition continues to happen. Like, it's not just one moment and you do it, but how did you approach the end of your career, mentally, career wise, for what you're gonna do next? How was that moment in time? Let's just say the year when you officially was like, not going to a team, I'm just doing life. What did that look
Mm.
like for you?
I think the transition continues on no matter what happens. And I say this is my third season not playing, and the fact that I'm counting that shows that it's still a transition.
Mm-hmm.
And you're an entrepreneur yourself, and when that time comes, you're gonna feel like you're ready, but you're never ready.
Mm-hmm.
That change of crust, that change of being, is a constant fight because you can play. I to be honest, I'm not watching basketball for the last 2 years because I see a matrix screen going down like the screensaver,
Yeah.
and that's in one way painful because I cannot do it anymore, and on the other way, it's just like I'm seeing the programming different way. But at the same time, I'm glad that I've started things early on entrepreneurship side. I'm glad I started early on the investment side where I can use the experience that I got from basketball and share it with people. And you mentioned about being like a mentor to the younger kids and bringing in the IQ. Continuing that helps us kind of feel it. But again, the transition still continues on. When I get on the court, I'm like, maybe I could spend 2 months and warm up and maybe play in like second division somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Then I come to the realization why I made that decision. How am I going to spend time with my family? We talked about right before we started how other leagues, 3x3 basketball, and other opportunities are coming up. I spent professionally, I'm not counting college, I spent 17 years on the road in a different hotel, playing 2 games a week, maybe sometimes more. And I know that my wife took a lot of sacrifices because of that,
Mm-hmm.
with her social life, with her work life. I don't want to put through that again, coming up to an age that I am.
Yeah, definitely.
Mm,
Definitely. Um, how did you go about discovering what you wanted to go into? Obviously, you're an entrepreneur, you're investing.
mm,
We talk about a lot of times of when you're playing, exploring, like just trying things. If someone says, yeah, you can come work at the coffee shop for a month, I'll show you around, like, go do it and go see what it's like to be a manager of a coffee shop, um, and really being curious as an athlete, even though we know it's very hard especially when you're playing two games a week, you're traveling, and then when you get downtime, you just want to be with your family. But it's still imperative to figure out and explore what things you're interested in outside of basketball, which will be huge for when you're done. How did you go about figuring it out? Did you do random things? Was it just kind of like, look, I've been able to make this type of income playing basketball. The next step to elevate would be this entrepreneurship and investing. Kind of, what was that journey like for you?
First, it started with Güler Legacy. It's about sharing the experience that we had through sports events and workshops and understanding what values and virtues basketball has and sharing that with other people. And we're still continuing it on. It's sustainable business. It's looking at a lot of impact outside of the reality of sports. And we are happy that we get to share our experience in a different way now. And then after it started with kind of with the curiosity. I was very into sneakers. I used to collect Jordans. A sneaker shop opened in Turkey, and I wanted to be a part of it. It started off with that. It didn't work out. We tried to build the e-commerce side of it, and I realized there's a thing called angel investing, and I'm like, that sounds interesting, and that sounds similar to what we do at Güler Legacy by sharing the experience and also creating a different asset class of investment. So that's when I start diving into the rabbit hole, understanding, researching, and became an active investor in the Turkish ecosystem. And throughout the years, it's evolving. I'm still learning. I'm trying to do new things. And main idea of it is figuring out a way to give back. And with my experience now, it's also becoming the right teammate for the startups that I get involved in. And again, that comes to the athletic background and how I was a teammate in the past. I am trying to create the same thing now.
Yeah, I think it's key. I think we always will be able to rely on understanding the importance of building the right roster, understanding, patience in building the right roster, and also knowing your strengths and weaknesses for the win, to get the win, and as that transfers, as I'm learning too, a lot. And I think that is one thing when people talk about athletes have these unique skill sets. The more I meet others that weren't athletes that are in entrepreneurship and business, it's just kind of like you see it. It's like you kind of understand when people say perseverance to do something. It's not a cliche. The word is said a lot, but to do it, to persevere day after day, and when it hits those years and you're like still working towards something, you see who falls off immediately and who can keep sustaining.
Exactly.
And it's not a cliche at all, and so definitely makes sense. You have the academy. Of course, you talked about mentorship and giving back. Let's go back a little bit. We had a call a couple months ago where we kind of started to talk about the parts of the business that I'm always talking about: agents, contracts, the things that really no one really kind of brings up. Now you have a lot of athlete podcasts about the funny things in the locker room or fights on the court, and a lot of NBA guys talking, but we still don't really talk about agents who are agents and contracts. How did you go about picking your first agent, especially, you went to college, etc., and then of course you had family members that were already playing at a high level? Did you go with the same one? What did that look like for you? And what type of education did you already have going into it? Um,
Yeah.
going into that decision.
Um, in Turkish side, it was fairly easy because my brother's agent opened up their shop next door to our house. We were already friends, and they
Yeah.
were already ex-basketball players, so they know my childhood more than almost my career. And I think our relationship was fairly easy because it was more of a friendship and mentorship and less the business side. We almost never had to talk about the business side other than making career point decisions. I had a different story on the American side when I was in college because I wanted to make it to the pro. I played NAIA, so it's already even now it's even more farther out, but it was already outside of the radar. I think when I was getting graduating, there was maybe 3 or 4 players that got drafted in the past 30 years from NIA. So it was a long shot for me anyways. And I start working with an agent because somehow we ran into each other. I don't know how in Montana that I ran into an agent. Of course, that's a different story. But we were kind of working towards building a relationship if it works in the United States. It didn't work out, and then we just finished that. And one thing that I realized also through partnerships of my agents back in Turkey is how agency works in the United States, especially during pre-draft, because I participated in workouts of a couple companies. But again, I was fortunate enough that I grew up in an environment where I already met the agents before I started working with them.
Do you think, what are the qualities from your experience? Of course, your experience with your agents, and those qualities of the relationship, of what that looks like to have a healthy player agent relationship. What do you think the qualities or signs are, green flags are, of an athlete having a healthy player agent relationship from your experience? And I'm sure you've heard a lot of stories and stuff throughout the years from other American players or Europeans that are playing abroad. What do you think are the green flags of a healthy player agent relationship?
I'll try to answer this with the perspective of my agent relationship directly, but also at the same time with all the agents I know in Turkey. I'm quite close friends with most of them. And I think one green flag is transparency. And it's harder to find these days, maybe because the business decisions come behind closed doors more than open cards. But I think that the more the cards are open for the player and for the agent, the easier the relationship is. And one thing I also realize, players and agents don't have to be friends, but they have to find a common ground of understanding and respect. That's also helpful. I think those are the two, and they're not business virtues, but they're, I think, personality virtues that would benefit the both sides.
Yeah. One thing we've been looking into, that we did research on and we evolved, was definitely personality. What we found was, talking to agents and players, both sides don't realize there was maybe a personality issue. Not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily that the individual wasn't doing the job right, but the agent didn't understand the personality of the client and how they wanted them to show up for them, and the player didn't understand an agent and how he expected to be able to have freedoms to do his business. And that all came down to personality and
Yeah.
how each other wants the communication styles, etc., which is something on our end, definitely working on, because I think that can be solved in a way, and it also can be solved in a way by more transparency of who you are. um One thing
Can
I
I
find, yeah, go ahead.
can I add something to that? And today I went through something like that because I'm kind of in a business deal right now, trying to work through the business deal. And one thing that I talked with the person that I'm on the other side of the deal is, okay, we're going to make a legal deal that's going to be contracted and everything. But aside from that, we need to write our expectations and what are we putting to the table on a different paper and secure that by heart. Maybe go back to it every 1 month, every quarter, to make sure that we're actually abiding those rules, because the legal document of a contract is both to protect and preserve the rights of whatever the deal is. But this is the integrity and personality put on paper. And this is something that maybe the agents and players can think about. Aside from the legal contract that they need to sign, this is something that they can visit as much as possible to provide for each other.
Yeah, I think being in the business world, it makes me even more aware of, like, the things we don't do in the sports side of things, the
We
lack of
do get a lot of things
communication.
for yeah, we do get a lot of things for granted. That's for sure.
Yeah.
And we put, I think, as athletes especially, we put a lot of expectation on that relationship, without mentioning it first, because we think that
Mm-hmm.
it's given, it's part of the business. But if you share it first and then expecting it, then you can have a kind of an right to expect that situation. But if you expect it without talking about it, then you're doing something bad for yourself as well.
Right. So you had a healthy player agent relationship. How did it work when it came time to your contracts? Was it just like, look, you trusted the person on the other side, so it was just like, okay, send me the contract, I sign? What did that look like for you when it came time to the contract situations that you were engaging in?
Well, the hardest part was when kind of ego got in the way. Um, when everything is going smooth with the team that I'm playing for, with the coach that I'm working with, and everything, that's totally different story. And the funny thing is, it's also as smooth if the things are not going well between me and the coach, and the role is not there for me. Um, but there was a point in my career where I was like, okay, I want this. And this wasn't a monetary value. This meant some different stuff as well. And it took me a while to realize that what I wanted did not exist the time the contract signing was happening.
Mm-hmm.
Mm, and I think that did not damage my relationship with the agents, but that damaged the business itself in different ways. Um, but to be honest, the contract years, we just when the time was coming up, we met up. We looked at how the year was going. We looked at what the market is for my type of player, my age of player, and we wanted to come to an agreement where, okay, this is what we're going to ask for, this is where we can target, and this is what's on the table. So for me and my agents, it went fairly smoothly most of the time.
Do you think it's one thing that the player side of it, needs to be accountable for? Um, is knowing when something you're pushing for is not on the table and you blame the agent that they couldn't get it done. When because sometimes I've seen certain guys that have left agents. I've asked, why'd you leave? And they said they couldn't get this done. And then they did get it. The other agent got it done. Sometimes there is cases where the player was right. They needed to leave because you weren't able to get them to a point. Who knows why? I'm not sure why.
Mm,
Maybe it was negotiating. Maybe that agent didn't know how to market and really negotiate to understand the value of that player to the coach or whoever. Um, but do you think in some cases the ego part, like you said, wanting things that just quite frankly weren't there, is the cause sometimes of friction between player agent relationships?
for sure. And also that's where also the ego of agent or agents come into play as well, because they're trying to run their business, and their business relies on my performance, but at the same time, my performance and my, let's say, placement is a part of their product. So they're playing a different game than what we're playing on the court. So sometimes the egos can get in the way for that as well. When I'm looking back, I was fortunate enough to block those egotistical ways out the door whenever we're meeting about most of the stuff. But the time period that I mentioned before, there was a lot of things going on at the same time. What I wanted was available for many players, my caliber, let's say, the year before, and the market was just not the same the year after. So that's why there's certain things that didn't happen that was outside of both of our controls. But at the
Mhm.
same time, there was ego and other things we were getting involved that changed a lot of things.
Yeah. We talk a little bit again. Clearly, there was transparency with the contract
Hmm.
and planning your career. What was the next step going to be with your agents? One thing, I had a recent call with a basketball player. He's an investor as well. From played, maybe I think second league Germany, etc. And he brought up WeEvolve, as you know what we're trying to do at WeEvolve, and he brought up, he's like, I mean, a guy that's making 10 million, they're not, they have an agent that works just with them. Obviously, his perspective of what I believe the reality is that not everybody making 10 million, and most of us have agents that's working with like 60 people.
Yeah.
But one thing we've been really trying to better understand and asking actual athletes, like, okay, knowing what we're doing at WeEvolve, what do you think is kind of the red flag or the hesitation regarding athletes actually wanting to have more agency over their careers? And as a vet, now you've moved on, former player, etc., and you've reflected, I'm sure, a lot. What is the realities of where we stand in the business? Not what FIBA has done or what the system has put us in, but what do you see is the responsibility of athletes in the business that if we want more transparency, etc., we have to do the work, or it will never really come?
You mentioned curiosity and planning something off the court. I think the curiosity works really well with what you just said as well, because we need to be curious. We need to understand what we're signing into. We need to understand what are the expectations are, not only with the performance and the money comes with it, but also in detail. Early in my career, I realized with the potential that I had with participating in national teams, I have access to relationships off the club level. I could build relationships on my own. That's marketing relationships, that brand relationships. And early on, if you sign a contract, you're signing off your marketing value as well to the teams, and they deal with it, and you're not making anything out of it. Mm-hmm. Understanding that and having the conversation to market myself outside of team agenda helped me build a brand. Good or poor, that's a different story, but it actually helped me do things on my own. So being curious, knowing what you're signing other than the payment structure is very important, whatever age you're at, wherever level you're at. And I think that's what comes into play, because with WeEvolve, as I understand, you get to see what's the standard is in every league and what you could actually learn from other standardized contracts.
Correct. There's not a lot of standards, not surprisingly, but I hope now things are changing. The new FIFA court case with transfers on that side for football completely going to change everything for federations.
Yes.
Commoditizing athletes won't be the same, and I hope basketball will follow suit. Which means there has to be more transparency, which means the model will have to change. But one of the biggest things I fight up against, again, talking to investors, talking to people that have never actually been an athlete, so they don't understand the dynamics of player, agent, club, from our perspective, it's just something they don't have much insight into, is we have to be curious. We have to want to know what's going on with our business. But do you think that the perception of, you see LeBron investing, you see Kevin Durant, etc., you see Naomi Osaka starting her own agency, Allison Felix started her own agency and starting her own VC fund, you see more athletes basically doing it, even other athletes on our caliber starting their own agencies. It's changing. Do you think that is something that is a change, or right now is just what they call it, kind of a wave? It's kind of like what's hot right now to be an athlete entrepreneur and an athlete in business. Do you think this is now the changing of the guard, and that this will continue to grow, athletes now being businessmen, women actually wanting more control over their careers? Or do you think right now it's just a phase? From your perspective, talking to maybe your former teammates that still kind of play, what do you see happening globally in the space? Or is it just an America thing?
Ooh, I think it is mainly an American thing.
Mm-hmm.
I would say most of the athlete entrepreneurs are overseas players in Europe, coming from America, and they get the education and they get the curiosity of what's happening in the US because they're more exposed to that. We need to educate more. I think Europe is working hard, especially through European Union and other initiatives, on how important dual career is, because the only thing we have is time, and it's very limited. What season are you on right now?
14.
14. I played 17, and we're both extremely lucky.
Mm-hmm.
The average is under 10 years, maybe 7, maybe 8. So knowing that, there needs to be preparation for what can happen after. Injury can happen, COVID can happen, everything can change. So moving towards that is quite important, and being ready for it is never going to be, you're never going to be ready, but being ready for it is going to help you be 4 or 5 steps earlier. I see a lot of Turkish athletes usually invest in real estate, and that would give them a chance to gain passive income. But also, I know that a lot of, let's say, smaller level players are looking into entrepreneurship a lot early on. And we're running our own business anyways by playing. So we know how that works, but being curious about and treating it as business means that you're going to look for other options to look for. Maybe going to the coffee shop and becoming a barista, even that's even a short period of time, or maybe looking into investing. So those are different options that you should always be curious about, and hopefully it's going to expand more.
Yeah. I think one of the visions for Wevolve especially is building this digital tool or digital companion that you can give to the youth. This is a little bit of IP, but I'm gonna keep saying it because maybe 2K gonna call me one day. I watched my little brother play NBA 2K, and I was watching him sign his contracts. It was giving him prompts on negotiating with the manager. It was giving him prompts on what best endorsement deal. All of this in NBA 2K when you play career mode.
Yeah.
And then he could also play manager mode. And I was like, you have more automated things on this video game than I have for my actual career.
Yeah.
So Sinan, if you know somebody NBA 2K or whatever, if they go do it, please help the world. I think it's a great collaboration for education. If we can find a way to get Wevolve NBA 2K to create something like this where the players actually have their stats, etc., and automate this for the youth and basically teach them how to manage their careers through a gamified platform. I believe this will really change the perspective of athletes and how we educate them. You know, people, we have seminars and stuff, but I know I was that player in the seminar in IU, Indiana University, and it was just like, all right, bro, I'm tired. I don't feel like listening to this right now at this moment. And it's not action based. When I need the information, that person, whoever did that seminar, I can't pick up the phone. But yeah, like you said, if you start to treat your career like a business, you're already learning how to manage a business. And so that's one of the things. It's like, how can we get more players treating their actual career like a business and making that almost a certification that you can leave with and be like, okay, I might not have all this work experience, but I did do this with my own career. Something I think could be dope. I've put out to universe enough times, so I'm put it out there again. Whoever over 2K.
And I support the manifestation of that. And one thing that athletes can do to understand is, of course, understand what they're signing and read through it, and asking questions even to ChatGPT. And hopefully when Wevolve has an AI that helps you make those decisions, that's one part of it. But also working on the P&L of your career earnings. knowing where the money is coming from, you know where it's coming from, but where is it going? Even just keeping track of that, and I've done a poor job at it for sure, but even keeping track of that is going to help them become a better business person in the end.
Vetting people is key. One current event, Dwight Howard, it came out he won the case, but he had a bad investment with some person that got him into a investing in the WNBA team. $7 million he lost. Another individual I was talking to, I didn't know. Even you think about someone like Tim Duncan, he had a manager that stole a lot of money from him, and again, you look at Tim Duncan like one of the guys that probably didn't make any mistakes with his money. You wouldn't think Tim Duncan. Vetting individuals in this business is key, and I mean, even as an entrepreneur now, vetting tech talent is like, I'm like, God, I'm having trauma responses. I've gone through 5 different agents. It's like now I gotta vet another group of people. It's so difficult. Another thing, at Wevolve, we really want to find a way to help at least create something where we can, who's on the caution board, not go to the same people, but we don't share it, and we kind of get hurt in private unless some journalist puts it out there and you get the name of the person. From your experience vetting people, but of course remaining silent, what's your stance on that? Obviously, it's an ego thing. I think, of course, no one wants to put out to the world that I got bamboozled. But what has been your experience with dealing with the influx of people that want to come on board, the influx of people that have all these things that they want to do with you business wise? How have you been able to vet those around you?
Even if you do the vetting the best way possible, something happens in life that gets in the way, and somebody will fall off the bus. So that happened to me more than once. The one thing that is necessary is the thing that I mentioned in between, where setting expectations, putting them on paper, and visiting those expectations often is going to keep everybody on track one way or another. And if those expectations are not working, then they can have the right to separate as well without any judgment or bad feelings, I guess, because when something happens and like, that's not what I wanted you to do, you did something bad for me, and that's a different and terrible relationship that starts. I don't have a golden formula for vetting the right people. I usually start with a high trust and then watch how they play around with that trust in order to continue. So I'm not the right person to maybe share that, but at the same time, be open enough to be transparent, but at the same time, make sure that you're protecting your own rights and expectations the best way possible when you're working on a new deal.
Yeah. A lot of it, we talk about trying to get knowledge. I'm always just trying to get knowledge, get players. It's not really something that's been known in our culture to really share much, share the individual name for the community to watch out for, or, really just sharing what we already know about certain leagues or what we know about certain investment deals or these athlete syndicates now is a big thing. And I'm sure a lot's going to come out with some bad deals from athlete syndicates. There's going to be good ones and there's going to be bad ones. What do you think is the key? More so me asking, what is the key to really trying to continue to push for more of a collective, more, I try not to use community because I know as athletes, we are very much kind of self-motivated, even though we've been on teams, we still very much so tunnel vision. It's really trying to figure out how do we better help the community or collective of athletes understand that, as I say, we are the solution we seek. A lot of the knowledge that we don't get in time or whatever is someone else has it, and finding unique ways to really bring that home because we have so much intellectual knowledge that we kind of throw away. I feel once we walk away, it's like, at least we have kids. You'll give it to your daughter for sure if she wants to play. You'll then tap into your network for her. If the women's game's different, you'll find other women that that played.
Mm-hmm.
Then it comes into play. It's like, how can we not throw that away when there's maybe 1,000 other young girls that also could learn from your knowledge? Is really understanding what's the thought from your standpoint, or do you think it's just something that you just don't see happening from athletes?
I think experience sharing happens at a level that's quite open and observable. When you and I went through a very similar situation in our lives.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't have the same life, we didn't have the same career, but I know that I ran into a problem once that you probably ran into. So me sharing my experience with you is a lot easier than sharing our experience with a 25-year-old athlete,
Mm-hmm.
because he or she hasn't been through that yet. I had this experience vividly with a teammate of mine, the best talent in the team, and we're trying to deal with, and we had a 15-year age difference. We're also trying to help 16-year-old, 17-year-old players to get ready for the pro league. And I try to tell them, like, there are certain things that are happening that they cannot hear. It enters and it goes faster through the other side. And I told him for first half of the season, second half comes, he's like, Abi, you're saying the right thing. I now realize what you were saying to me beginning of the season. So there's a age difference, even though we're similar level in the team roles, and he doesn't get it because he can't get his point through to the other ones.
Mm-hmm.
So for us, experience sharing can be helpful, but we need to put scenarios and simulations for the younger ones to understand what can happen and what could be done. That's why I think like a gamified version of what you're doing and kind of maybe putting through a simulation might be quite beneficial for them to understand. And you told with your brother, right? And
Yeah,
yeah,
my
when
brother.
he's playing, like he's learning more than what we could have learned in the past when 2K, I don't know, 14 was happening, when my career wasn't even around.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it does make sense. It's like someone will listen to their peer
Yeah.
before the OG tells them. Um, you talked about, of course, simulations.
Mm-hmm.
One time we were talking about how many contracts you signed in 1 year. Um, you were playing EuroLeague, you've played national team. When you think back of like a year where you probably signed the most contracts in one, think about also endorsement deal, if you sign anything on the side for your own, using your own image, etc. How many contracts technically could you sign in 1 year as an athlete, especially now when we talk about NIL athletes,
Mm-hmm.
or branding becoming bigger, so athletes are brands. Dealing with contracts can become a norm now.
Yeah.
3x3 esports, they sign contracts maybe every month
Mm-hmm.
because of gaming. Talk about the influx of contracts that could come through, and how that, how did you feel when those multiple contracts came through? Of course, you had an agent you trusted, so again, you knew they were looking over it for your best interest. But
No,
what's your
the
experience with dealing with the influx of contracts that came across the table that you had to sign off on?
so even if we just talk about signing a club contract at a European competition level, you are signing 4 different documents before even the season starts. So first one is your private contract, which has your agent on it as well, which has all the responsibilities of all sides, plus the payment structure of all parties, and also certain amendments of medical issues, marketing issues, this and that. So that's first one, and that's usually the longest one. And then EuroLeague standard contract comes in. That's fairly talks about marketing of EuroLeague rights, certain payment structure, plus other rules. You sign that. That's a 1 or 2 page document, I think, at the moment. And then you signed your local league contract, similar to EuroLeague contract. Let's put that aside. But I think the hardest one to do is the bylaws. You sign a team bylaw contract, which unfortunately teams put you in a position, and this is where athletes need to be educated and curious enough to read through what's going on there. It's basically putting you in a position where all those other contracts can be void with no, I wouldn't say no particular reason, but you're giving a lot of the control of giving the void of the contract to the club, basically. So I think that was the hardest thing that was the most negotiating I've done with teams most of the time, because they were trying to make me sign things that's voiding the other contract.
Yeah. No, I had one time, it was a clause in the rules for the team bylaws, was that if someone on the board felt like if I did something or against someone on the board, the way the language was kind of like, okay, if I disagree with someone on the board, I could get cut, which is very loose because that's not fair. Like if the board tells me to do something I'm not okay with doing, that is also not clear what's, where the line is drawn. You could find yourself in a sticky situation. And of course, some players signed it right at practice. And I was like, y'all don't sign that. Like you don't know, but we've heard stories already where, you sign those bylaws and now the bylaws overwrite everything else you've signed.
Mm-hmm.
And now you have a totally different agreement, and you don't know until something bad happens or until something changes and you're like, what do you mean? And then it comes up, and it's kind of like athletes being proactive, not reactive. And that's where we have to change it. Reactive when something bad happens. Now we want to know everything what was in the contract. No, be proactive, and go from there. Last question I have for you, obviously going into investment, you have, multiple businesses. You've invested into a number of companies.
Mm-hmm.
Who's an athlete investor or athlete businessman that you look up to? So, as athletes, we had people that, we kind of modeled our game against, or, we thought was the GOAT. Now, as you transition, who's someone that you look up to? And of course, if it's not an athlete, of course, that's fair as well.
I think, growing up watching MJ and considering him the GOAT helped me understand that there's something happens outside of the court as well. And he never mentioned it, but he built businesses around his brand quite in a strong way because he was performing so great on the court. I think LeBron is the first athlete that mentions more than an athlete, and it's okay to have initiatives off the court. MJ didn't really portray that side until he retired. LeBron and his age group of athletes start showing that there's more happening than what happens on the court. But now I would say in the States, I usually follow like what Steph and his team is doing and Kevin Durant and Boardroom is doing. And in Europe, I'm quite curious about how Nico Rosberg, the F1 driver, and Mario Götze are doing and how they're approaching investments. As I move towards this path of my career, this chapter, I realize that I'm moving more and more towards a bit more institutionalized investment models, because I'm not earning as an athlete, but also learning about what the opportunities are, how I can impact in what way is a very fun and curious path to follow.
Yeah, those are some big names for sure. I think it's definitely great. It's changing the stigma and the perspective, which again allows a player now to look at not only the talent of LeBron or KD, but then also saying, I want my own agency, and I want, now the dreams are different now,
Yeah.
which is beautiful. NBA PA just put a new, I forgot what it's called exactly, but it's in Seville or
Hmm.
Malaga, Spain,
The
where
the
they have,
the retreat or something. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
the
The
retreat,
facilities. Yeah.
yeah, super dope, of course, something that I think will be amazing for, a larger collective of athletes, especially those that are expathletes, as I call us.
Hmm.
But there was one person talked about, obviously it's very exclusive for a reason. Of course, these are some of the biggest stars, so it has to be safe and private.
Hmm.
One question I had though was, as an angel investor, how do you go from, when you're at the upper echelon, maybe EuroLeague level guys, etc., it's hard to talk to some of those individuals until
Hmm.
they're farmer and the agent isn't blocking anymore, or those people
Yeah.
that want you to stay in a box. Yes, the retreat is great. I think it's an amazing opportunity, but is there a threshold between the PAs and the agencies that are on that level, EuroLeague guys, keep you in like a box, and maybe the influx of deals and stuff you see are kind of only tied to the initiatives and agendas of those that have created the box, if that makes sense. Um,
Hmm. For
and
me, I realize. Oh, go ahead.
go ahead. No, go ahead.
For
What's your
me,
thoughts on that first statement?
uh, I realize that the box happens because most of the players don't have the curiosity or the time to allocate.
Mhm,
You and I, we look through entrepreneurship in a different way than most of our teammates, probably 99% of them.
mhm,
So we already get to an access of deal flow in a very different way than most of them again. So those events and locations are there for, I guess, baiting into that curiosity a bit because they don't have the time. And when they're allocating that time of rest, practice, and socializing in one place, then maybe they can have time to spend time on how to allocate their assets, how to invest, this and that. So I think that's necessary that we have those boxes for those who are not as curious as we are.
mhm. As a player, due to time, etc., and also stardom, if you're, known in
Mm.
wherever you are, Turkey, for example, um, how did emotionally, was the box lonely, or you just never noticed it?
Ooh, I think the box is always lonely. No matter
Mm-hmm.
how good friendships you have, how close you're with your family, that's one part of it. Um, but at the same time, you try to set up in a way that you find serenity in that box with the people that surround you or the environment that you put yourself in.
Mm-hmm. Right. So you would say the retreat concept, are you excited for more of that to kind of become a thing, for athletes, where it seems like they're kind of mixing in the ability to kind of explore, do a little bit of traveling, but be in beautiful locations, um, and kind of expand that curiosity in a controlled space, that allows you to not lose a step on with your game and training, but also be able to think outside the box a little bit. Um, what's your thoughts around that initiative, and the first step the NBA has taken, especially bringing it abroad as well, which is unique?
I think especially for players that are not in the top 50 of the NBA, creating this access for the NBA players and maybe opening up to certain players in different type of their careers is important. When you're asking the question, I immediately remembered when Jordan was shooting Space Jam, he had the gym set up next to the studios so he could play more than he could actually act.
Mm-hmm.
And he had the other players and he had this his game going. And now we see a place in New York, a place in Texas, a place in Los Angeles where only few have access to, but at the same time, they can bring different types of players. So I think seeing that explored in Europe and giving access to these players is going to be very, very important as a business model as well. This can give ideas to other people to invest their money in.
Yeah, no, definitely think it's an opportunity. And again, when you talk about the global number of athletes that would be members of something like that, but
Yeah,
don't have to the restrictions of like, I can go to the coffee shop right now and be cool. The people that do know me, there's more so like, oh, I can have a conversation with them. I'm not like at risk, which gives me a little bit more advantage, truthfully,
yeah,
to move around and explore and be curious compared to other individuals. But yeah, I do think Julie and I, as you know, my business partner, we have a plan. It's in the black book, first of all. But yeah, when we saw it, we were like, somebody heard us talking on a on a podcast or on our WhatsApp. They hacked us because look at this. But we know they can only do it for a certain tier of player. The door is still wide open for the other tier. And I think, with container homes and more of a nomadic lifestyle being normalized, either way, I know we're up on time. Definitely appreciate you coming through, Sinan, and having a conversation. Of course, I know I could ask you questions all day.
Single seeds only grow the trees if left alone to breathe. So let's take some time to expose the weeds. Feeding off the roots of the culture. Vultures are next to you, convincing you to saving the forest when they the wrecking crew. I guess I gotta do it on myself.